Good evening, everybody. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live, and I got this text sent to me. They call it the Holy Arrival, talking about the red heifers coming into Israel. I'm going to play this little clip here for you, but I wanted to discuss with you information about this particular video here, mainly because of the red heifer that Israel's been putting so much emphasis on. This has been something that's been going on for years now. Israel trying to get a red heifer in, preparing for the third temple, and getting everybody ready for that. And what alarms me more than anything is that the Christian community is actually behind all of this. And I cannot help but wonder, what are we forgetting here? Before we get into that, though, let me play this little clip here for you. It's less than a minute. Let's listen into it.
All right, Ilya, we're with your Figurine Airport. What in the world is going on here?
What in the world is an interesting expression. The world has just changed in ways that people are only now beginning to feel. The red heifers have just arrived in Israel. They're still less than a year old. They have to be 2 years old in one day. But when they are 2 years old in one day, we can perform the Red Heifer Ceremony, and that will allow us to begin the temple service in completeness. We don't need the temple to do that. We just need a small altar in the proper space on the Temple Mount. And when we begin the temple service, then it can become a house of prayer for all nations. And that's what we're all waiting for. I want to take
All right, so they're saying they're waiting for the red heifer in order to be able to offer this on the Temple Mount, and that this would make Israel become a place for prayer for all nations. And as I've mentioned to you before, we're talking about New World Order. We're talking about a one world religion, etc. But how many people forget what Jesus says here in Matthew 23? Now, keeping in mind, and I'm not here to pick on the Orthodox community per se, but I'm just trying to remind you as Christians what Jesus himself says, right? He says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer, therefore you shall receive the greater damnation." He says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, you make him twofold the child of hell, more the child of hell than yourselves." That's pretty doggone blunt, if you ask me. Pretty blunt. Jesus says you make your convert more a child of hell than they are themselves. Now, how many people remember? Okay, Nehemiah Gordon, right? He's one very famous that has brought this out. Nehemiah Gordon and Pharisees. He will let you know straight up that when it comes to, and here we go right here, this is the video for it, that a Pharisee is the Orthodox Jews today. Listen to this. Let's listen to this little clip right here.
Actually, I've dressed today as a modern-day Pharisee. I don't normally dress this way, but I've dressed in the garb of a modern-day Pharisee to illustrate to you what it would mean to obey the Pharisees. You would have to dress according to the traditional Pharisaical dress and follow Pharisaical practices. This is what it would mean to obey the Pharisees, because I was actually raised as a Pharisee, as a modern Orthodox Jew, before I became a Karaite and Old Testament Jew. And actually the word Karaite comes from the Hebrew word kara, which is the ancient Hebrew word for the Hebrew Scriptures or Old Testament, and the variation of that is mikra, which is still used today in Israel, kara or mikra. And if kara meaning Hebrew Scriptures, someone who follows the Hebrew Scriptures is called a karaite or a...
That's just based on the Old Testament part there. I was kind of hoping he was going to talk about the fact that, which he does in this very same video here, Nehemiah does talk about how that Orthodox Jews today, in order to be a rabbi, you have to be able to prove your lineage going all the way back to the temple times, Second Temple time period there, that you are descendant of the Pharisees. Now, this is what he brings out actually in that particular video right there. Now, somebody's actually, the one I caught here is just something that somebody else has actually loaded. But The interesting thing in regards to that, though, as I'm saying, though, when we're looking at this here, is that they're bringing back these red heifers. Jesus reminds you that the Pharisees, they'll do everything they can to get a convert, but the convert becomes twofold more the child of hell than themselves. Then you also take and you combine that with Matthew 23, when we have here also where Jesus says, "You serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall kill and crucify. Some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city." All right, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias son of Barchaeus, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. And again, who is he talking about? The Pharisees, the scribes, and the Pharisees. And he calls them serpents, generation of vipers. Now, we don't need to go on and back into this same study over and over and over. I've proven successfully on multiple times from the book of Ezra that the seed was mingled, which doesn't mean that every Jew that is Orthodox is a Pharisee to begin with, but that bloodline was mixed according to Ezra chapter 9 when they were down in Babylon. Clearly, we've identified that on multiple occasions. All right. So what are we dealing with though? This whole thing about bringing back this red heifer. Now, the Red Heifer Ceremony itself is just strange, period. In fact, it is considered to be one of the quote-unquote mitzvahs that the Orthodox community carries out with completely no understanding as to why. But I want to point things out to you on this. And the reason I'm doing this is because so many people are really looking to this to be something fulfilling a biblical prophecy, totally negating the fact that Jesus Christ has come and fulfilled prophecy in his fullness, in his completeness, and we have no need of any other sacrifices or anything else whatsoever to fulfill any biblical command. And no, there will be no law coming out of Israel as people are claiming. When Jesus came himself, he was the law coming forth. He was the fulfillment of all the prophecy. All right, so looky here. We're in the book of Numbers, chapter 19. The Lord spoke unto Moses unto Aaron, saying, "This is the statute, the law, which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that you bring you a red heifer, faultless, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke. And you shall give her unto Eleazar the priest, and she shall be brought forth without the camp, and she shall be slain before his face. And Eleazar the priest shall take of her blood with his finger, and sprinkle of her blood toward the front of the tent of the meeting 7 times. And the heifer shall be burnt in his sight, her skin, her flesh, and her blood with her dung shall be burnt. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and cast it into the midst of the burning heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, shall bathe his flesh in water. Afterward he may come into the camp, and the priest shall be unclean until the even." So just going through the ceremony made the priest unclean, right? "And he that burned her shall wash his clothes in water, and bathe his flesh in water, and shall be unclean until the even. And a man that is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and lay them up with the camp in a clean place, and it shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel for a water of sprinkling. It is a purification from sin." Now watch what he's going to say here next here. "And he that gathered the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until even. And it shall be unto the children of Israel, and unto the stranger that sojourns among them for a statute. He that touches the dead, even a man's dead body, shall be unclean 7 days. The same shall purify himself therewith on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and shall be clean. But if he purify not himself the 3rd day and the 7th day, he shall not be clean. Whosoever toucheth the dead, even the body of any man that is dead, and purify not himself, he hath defiled the tabernacle of the Lord. That soul shall be cut off from Israel, because the water of sprinkling was not dashed against him. He shall be unclean, his uncleanness is yet upon him." Now this is the one that's very important. Why do I say it's important? Because in modern times, if they're bringing back the red heifer, they're getting ready to dedicate the temple. They're wanting to bring in a 3rd temple, and they're going to dedicate that 3rd temple. But you have to understand, the red heifer, after that red heifer was burnt, the ashes were taken and they mixed that ashes of that red heifer with water. And then they would take that water of the ashy water and they would sprinkle it upon the people to purify them. Now we know that Paul, as he says over here in Hebrews, if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctify to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Wow, now that's an interesting concept right there, isn't it? See, the heifer, the sprinkling the unclean sanctified the purifying of the flesh. But it didn't do anything for the conscience. And as Paul said, to purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. For this cause he is the mediator between the New Testament, that means of the death of the redemption of the transgression that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Now, what is the point that I want to make right here? When we're looking at this order that's being done, it is evident that Israel is about to deal with war before the building or before the resurrection of the third temple. And as a result of that, they need that red heifer in order to be able to cleanse their hands. This is the reason why Israel's not gone to war with Iran. This is why Israel's not pushed for that much broader war there. Because they need a red heifer, because once they go to war with Iran, then they're going to want to build the third temple. And if they're going to build the third temple, they want to have what they believe is necessary in order to cleanse the people, in order to be able to enter into the temple. And that's for both Jew and Gentile alike. Now, do I agree with that? Absolutely not. Like I said, you negate the very work that Jesus Christ came and did for you. And that's where I have a big problem, right? All right, let's look right here. This is coming from the Chabad.org's website. And it's talking about the red heifer. What was the red heifer? What was the red heifer, okay? One of the most enigmatic mitzvahs of the Torah is the para adumah, the red heifer, which was used for ritual for purification. There have been only 9 such heifers in history, and our tradition tells us that there will be one more in the future. All right, now, here's some things I highlighted I want you to look at, though. Rashi elaborates, because Satan and the nations of the world taunt Israel, saying, what is this commandment, and what purpose does it have? Therefore, the Torah uses the term statute. I have decreed it. You have no right to challenge it. It also goes on to say there are laws in the Torah that do not have a comprehensible rationale. What is so strange about this particular law? The red heifer presents a great paradox. The priest who is involved in the preparation of the heifer himself becomes impure through the process. Strange indeed. Hasidic philosophy answers thusly, we do the mitzvahs not because we understand them, but because they are his will. And this also extends to the mitzvahs we think we understand. We need to do these mitzvahs simply because they are God's will, not because they make sense to us. All right? Now, add that, and then look right here. The priest would use the mixture of red heifer ashes and water to purify a ceremonial, something that was unclean. It was primarily used to cleanse those who were exposed to a dead body, according to the book of Numbers 11 through 13. It was also used to remove ritual defilement created by taking the spoils of war. Now, if you're going to negate Jesus Christ as truly being the Messiah that God sent, then there can be nothing else that the red heifer and bringing back this ceremonial ritual could do but other than to usher in the Antichrist, period. And that's where we're at right now. Isn't it interesting, too? Have you ever thought about it, right? I mean, here we are. And I've really looked at this as well. Another one that really kind of bugs me is when we go back to the Exodus, right? And we're in chapter, well, I'm actually in chapter 12. It's not the one I actually wanted to go to. Let's see if there was something I highlighted here. I opened it, but I forgot why I actually opened that one. I want to go back to Exodus, chapter 1, verse 22. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Or if you remember, the Pharaoh of Egypt during the time of Moses was looking to get rid of the child of Moses. And so he had gotten these prophecies that were going on. And so therefore he put out the execution orders to kill this promised child that was coming, much like that of Jesus. You know, there was the prophecies, according to the wise men, that a Savior was born in Bethlehem. And in the case going back during the times of Moses, Pharaoh heard of a deliverer that was going to be born, and so he sent to kill off the boys, the male boys, I believe it was 2 years old and down, something similar to that of what happened over in the time of Jesus. And in doing so, he was trying to kill off, to make sure that that child could not be born. But you know what I find interesting is that they actually took, let's just read a little bit of this right here. And the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. Wait a minute, let me back up a little further. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and spread abroad, and they were a dread because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and brick and a manner of service in the field, and their service wherein they made them to serve with rigor. And the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, you shall look upon the birth stool. If it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then shall she live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing? Why have you saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwife come into them. And God dealt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mightily. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. But then it goes on to say, and Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Now, when you look at the movie that they put out about the Exodus, we always see the hungry crocodiles there in the Egyptian river, which it was full of hungry crocodiles. So it wasn't just the children drowned, but the children no doubt were eaten by the crocodiles as well. I cannot help but wonder if there's not a symbology to this as well, because I say that in regards to the passing of Planet X. According to the Colburn manuscript, and I do not endorse this as a biblical manuscript, so I want to clarify that. But according to the Colburn manuscript there, it was during the time of the Exodus that Planet X was passing the earth. And it is also what is attributed to all these miraculous events that delivered the children of Israel out of bondage, out of Egypt. Now, if that is the case, I cannot help but think that the throwing the children to the river could have been a sacrifice to the reptilian gods. The Pharaoh, in essence, was offering up a sacrifice, if indeed it was Pharaoh that was doing this, was offering a sacrifice unto these reptilians. And then at the same token, here we are in modern times. Israel is getting ready to build the third temple. The Pharisees, whom Jesus has identified as serpents, whom he has also said that when they cross sea and land, they make their converts twofold more the child of hell than they themselves. And yet, in Christian circles, Israel has become so worshipped. And I'm so fearful that the people have forgotten who their Savior really is, that Jesus Christ himself is truly the divine one. He's the Savior. He was the anointed one. But instead, people have elevated the rabbis of Israel to such a degree that Jesus is nearly completely forgotten. And yet all the calamities that are coming upon the earth right now, and the fact that we do know that Nibiru, or Planet X, is coming back, and I know that it is a reptilian planet, and many of the things that we have read about in these historical documents will come upon this earth and repeat once again. So think about it. And in fact, if you look at Jeremiah, this is another one I thought was interesting. And this is a scripture that is fulfilled according to the New Testament when they came down and killed all the children in Bethlehem. Remember this one right here? Thus saith the Lord, a voice is heard, Ramah, lamentation, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are not. Literally in Hebrew, ki anenu, because they don't exist. I mean, that is monumental. They don't exist. I mean, I could take you on one like that there and make your mind just really go for a tailspin, right? In fact, I got to write it down. While I'm right here, I got to write it down. Jeremiah 31. And 14, they don't exist. Kianenu. Jeez. I mean, how many of you could really think deeply about that one, right? Kianenu. I'm not even going to go there. I can't go there. I really can't. I mean, you really got to think deep. But let's continue on, though. Thus saith the Lord, refrain thy voice from weeping, thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded in the Lord, and they shall come back from the land of the enemy. And there is hope for thy future, saith the Lord, and thy children shall return to their own border. I have surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself. You have chastised me, and I was chastised, as a calf untrained. By the way, that is like saying in the Hebrew language, as that cow has not had a yoke put on its neck. Remember what it says about the red heifer? Never could have had a yoke on its neck. And here we are looking at a sacrificial service. Ephraim, and that's another interesting thing in itself, because Ephraim was part of the house of Israel. And there again, it goes back to the lost tribes of Israel that people always talk about. And as I've said so many times, it's already been fulfilled. They've already come home. The mere fact that Rachel weeping for her children and Ephraim being there, which is a representation of the house of Israel, clearly shows you that the house of Israel was in the land of Israel at that time. There's some things we really got to think about, guys. This is really, really getting interesting. And I wanted to share some of this with you because I do see the preparations for an Antichrist to come on the scene. I see that the red heifer also, as we have just read here, that it was also to be used to remove the ritual defilement created by the taking of the spoils of war. That tells me Israel is about to get ready to go to war. And I know that Israel is getting ready to go to war, and they're going to go to war with Iran. And by the way, Iran has some things that no other nation has. Another reason why Israel wants to go to war with Iran. Anyway, we're going to dig deeper into that. Listen, check out Patreon. Just loaded a video there about a particular project that's going on. It's actually called, let's see, where did I put my notes on that? The Project Ice Bridge. Kind of like a classified, a little semi-classified information I shared with our friends over on Patreon. you can check out in the description on that. Also, I'm going to be doing a little news update about President Xi Jinping, China, things like that, to kind of get you guys up to speed there. This here is on Danoon Institute of Biblical Research. I've only shared a 30-minute clip here on Israeli News Live because we want to get our teachings moving back to Danoon Institute. God bless you. Thank you for listening. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live. And don't forget, check out our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org. And if God lays it on your heart, please support this work. Not many people appreciate the truth anymore. People want their ears tickled. But if you don't want your ears tickled, you want the truth, please come join us, support what we're doing. God bless you.